Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. A Willow of Weeps. Her bones were brittle, but not from age. These days, it was a workout in itself to wipe the counters clean, and had even become hard to pick up the unused dishes she'd find on the table at the end of the day. The ceramic was too heavy for her frail hands. She set a place at the table for each of her children, complete with her finest china and silverware in the proper way. But, she supposed, her children had better things to do than come eat with their poor mother. She didn't mind, seeing as she only wanted them to be happy. And so the table was continuously set and continuously taken apart, but never a drop of food to clean up, as the cycle repeated itself over and over again. Every day she made the bed in the guest room, which no one ever used, and the beds in her daughter and son's room. She never made her own, because she was afraid of encouraging bed bugs in the tightly packed sheets. The days went by in a blur, and how could they not when she was biding her time, cleaning off the same shelves, bedside tables, and book covers she did the day before? For a house with very little movement, there sure seemed to be a lot that needed to be done. So there she was, perched on a wooden stool at the granite countertop, scraping at some invisible speck of dirt. She hummed to herself, softly rocking back and forth. It was hard to tell when she had last eaten, but her shaky hands shed some light on the matter. She grasped the silver knife in her hand and then let it drop, a resounding clink following suit. "Oh, Charlie boy, how I love you," she cooed. "Oh, Lisa darling, how I adore you." She went on and on, singing them praises with a tired smile on her face. She hummed a tune in the still air. "Pick me a pear from that tree outside. Hand me a willow of weeps. Kiss all my tears away, darling, while I send you to somber sleep." Only when she heard no reply did she start up again. "Take me to dance, and we'll sing along the lonesome tune of the night. Lend me your ear, and I'll make a song to sing you. Goodbye, goodbye." The fire beckoned, so she willed her legs up off the stool, grounding her feet on the cool tiles of the kitchen floor. She made her way to the little carpet beside the hearth, humming all the while. The rug beneath her was cold and stiff, a mass of black and white fibers, all woven together. Once the fire was stoked, she huddled her knees to her chest and resumed that gentle rocking. back and forth. She picked up a pretty little jar by her side, lazily examining the carvings engraved on the stone. Swirls and swooshes of wind alongside a small, wilting chrysanthemum, delicately designed. She traced the carvings with her thin, brittle finger. Then she opened the jar. She reached 2 fingers into the opening and took a small pinch of the contents. With a delicate flick, she sent the ashes into the heat. She watched, mesmerized, as the fire grew and died, grew and died. With each pinch of ashes, she found herself smiling, humming that tune that kept on a loop in her mind. "Oh, Charlie boy, how I love you," she cooed once more, sending some ashes into the fire. "Oh, Lisa, darling, how I adore you." Then she took the jar, perched dangerously close to the flames, and sent the rest of the ashes down into the coal. The fire roared in gratitude and grew bigger still, and all the while her heart beat with a sad, sad rhythm as she kept that absent smile on her lips. Then, to her horror, she heard footsteps, loud, panicked footsteps, making their way down the stairs in the hallway. So close they were, she was sent into such a state of panic that she dropped the jar onto the floor, its ceramic shell breaking upon contact into hundreds of tiny shards. She let out a scream. "Oh, Charlie boy, how I love you," she sobbed, huddling against herself, rocking furiously. "Oh, Lisa, darling, how I adore you." She sobbed and wailed until she thought she couldn't anymore. And even then, it continued, an endless flow of tears. She let out another scream as she felt 2 sturdy hands on her shoulders. "Oh, Charlie boy, is that you?" she wailed, rocking harder. "Mrs. Jamie, it's time for your medicine, darling." Another shriek, the words sending her into an episode. "Oh, Lisa, darling. Oh, Lisa, darling. Where are you, Lisa, darling?" She began slamming her hands into her knees and rocking so hard forward that she sent her whole frail body toppling onto the ground. "Mrs. Jamie, it's me, Randy. I'm your nurse. I'm here now. Everything is okay now," she wailed some more. Because, of course, everything wasn't okay. "Charlie boy, Lisa darling, help me." And then she surrendered to Randy's strong grasp, wailing still, as he took her upstairs to her bedroom. She was so worked up that she could barely see, her eyes welling with every thought of that fire, those ashes. She kicked and flailed as she was firmly placed into bed, tucked in tight for all the bed bugs to see. "Mrs. Jamie, it's okay," Randy said softly, stroking her hair as he fed her various pills and a glass of water. "I'm here now. You're safe. I will keep you safe." She looked up at him with big, innocent eyes. Just like that, she had already forgotten the panic she was in moments ago. She resumed the gentle rocking as her frail hands clutched the sheets. "Charlie," she murmured. "Lisa, they're safe too now. They're not in pain anymore. Hush now, dear. It's about time you went down for a nap, huh?" The children of the Forsaken. The villagers called them Children of the Forsaken. Those shunned to the Bear Claw Mountains, exiled from society. But the children called themselves the Watchers, for their view of the villages nestled in the valley below. And to their parents, they were merely Raya Navarium, Lilith Skyden, and Quill Weston. "Who in the Risen's name takes the forest path to Bearclaw?" asks Quill, features twisting as a gentle frown and harsh laugh compete for dominance, like wolves fighting over a kill. Lilith gives him the scolding look of a mother. "Don't say that. Mother says it's a bad word. I heard that the Risen will come take your voice at night if you forget to say your prayers." Though the Risen, fallen dead brought to life by the god of death, Volterem, were more myth to faithless villagers than a poor, disease-ridden harvest. Amongst the Forsaken, the ancient gods were sacred. Quill gives an assertive nod to Raya. "You were brought to the Forsaken as a child. What do you think? Are we going to make another friend?" Raya's features may as well have been carved from stone, like the statues of the Risen in the underground temple below their feet. Her eyes are cast on the singularity in the distance, the cloaked figures cutting through the path against a blur of wind and snow, with the relentless endurance of a river's current. Raya was only a child when she was sent to the Forsaken. But as she grew, her past came back in fragments, like the shards of a broken clay bowl she'd accidentally dropped onto her foot trying to reach the table earlier this morning. Sometimes Raya prayed to Voltirem at night for the empty contentment of forgetting, to let her past die like all things in this world. But watching the figures, she supposed that there was a certain strength to remembering and enduring that was a part of living. I remember that the nun who heard me singing and saw me floating screamed and threw a book at me. I remember crying because I was confused more than hurt. Her face falls to her woolen boots covered in snow. I remember the thin cotton blanket that I shivered through all the way up to the mountains. I don't remember my father very much, except for the fact that he lived in a very big house and never seemed to be there. Quill squints through the haze, trying to see through the chaos of the storm. I don't see a child with them. Raya climbs atop a boulder with practiced movements, testing the heel of her boots against the stone for ice patches, and peers over the edge. I think you're right. Quill crosses his arms with false bravado. Of course I am. They're coming for us, but not for the reason we think. Raya turns to each of them and asks them the same question. how old are you? Quill is 10 years old. Lilith turns 8 next week. Raya is the oldest of them, almost 11. One of them wears the white robes of a priest. They were sent to cut our throats and take our voices too. Raya abandons her perch, staggering backwards. We're not even 16. Must have been a terrible harvest. Quill starts, before cut off by an elbow blow to his side. Lilith's voice trembles, and Raya tells herself that it is Lilith's teeth chattering from the cold, while Quill merely rubs the edges of his bony ribs. I need to tell Mother. She'll know what to do. Word of the priest's arrival and rumors about another nulling ceremony to take the voices of the children spread through the small town of Bearclaw faster than an avalanche. The children are kept safely behind locked doors and shuttered windows, while townspeople brandish an assortment makeshift weapons: knives, pickaxes, woodcutters' axes, shovels, old potions, and spellbooks. By the time the travelers arrive, the townspeople are ready and waiting. The children have been instructed to stay inside, stay away from the windows and door. But the coziness of the fireplace is almost stifling compared to the tenuous, cold, bitten air. Lilith turns away from the window, her eyes damp with tears. A few moments ago, her mother had forced her to look her in the eyes and wrote that if she could not be strong for herself, she must be strong for others. Her father, who mostly grunted in response to anything she said, hugged her and wrote that he loved her. Only now, Lilith started to realize that she would need to be strong for her people if her mother wasn't there to lead them. Huddled in the corner, hugging her knees against her chest, Raya tries to press her body flat against the wall to steady her trembling frame. Her mother wrote mutterings about the trouble that youth these days seem to find. Then she had stuffed firelight potions in the bag across her chest, wrapped another coat around her shoulders, and strung an amulet around her neck. Raya rubbed the markings on the rabbit bone, hoping there would be enough magic in the amulet to protect both of them. Meanwhile, Quill fights the urge to sneeze, itchiness crawling up his throat, threatening to explode. Earlier that evening, his father had taken out a gleaming, enchanted sword from a cabinet and donned the knight's armor that he'd stolen off a rotting corpse in a cave. When his father gave Quill the dagger that he used for skinning game, he wrote for Quill to protect the girls. At first, Quill wanted to point out that Lilith had been practicing her blood song, and Raya was a gifted illusionist. But taking in the hard lines of his father's saw, cast against harsh torchlight, Quill understood. His father also expected him to protect himself, prove himself. We're no priests, and we mean you no harm. The woman's weary steps sink into the snow, too loud and soft At the same time, like the toll of church bells, carried by the flurries of wind, Lilith's mother uses a pierce of charcoal to write on an empty page of her spellbook. Raya flinches at the groaning wooden beams of the cabin as the wind rattles the bolted shutters. Lilith inhales a deep, shaky breath, and Quill stifles his sneeze. I apologize for our deception. Only priests or knights are allowed to travel to the mountains. Tugging down the pristine pale cowl of his cloak, the man takes a step closer. We came here to warn you that your children are in danger. Are they well? Quill's father aims the tip of sword against the man's throat. The crowd gathered in front of the gates stands unwilling, unyielding against the wind. They lurk like a massive shadow, looming over the two strangers as the sun dips below the horizon. They want to take your children's ability to speak. As if sensing their prying eyes, watching from the window, the woman turns to the them, tugging at the man's cloak. Can we see the children? Please? Lilith's mother gestures towards Quill's father. With a heavy sigh, he drops the sword to his armored side. Raya's mother walks towards the door. All three of the children duck their heads down below the window, as if caught stealing maple sweets from the table, and glance at anywhere but each other in guilty silence. None of them flinch when there's a gentle knock against the door, as they follow Raya's mother in stunned, uncertain silence. The fickle, unruly wind seems to whisper in their place. Lilith tugs her thick cloak closer around her shoulders and straightens her shoulders to seem older than she is. Raya keeps her head lowered, focused on chasing her mother's shadow in a game of tag she's been playing since she was born. Quill trudges along, wearing his father's boots that are a few sizes too large for him. Kneeling on the snow, the woman flicks back her cowl. Her eyes are focused with concern. They said you were young, but they failed to mention you weren't old enough to bleed. Her gaze softens as she glances at Lilith. I have a daughter, Para. You remind me of her. The man turns to Quill. Do you know why we are here? Lilith glances at Quill, who in turn glances at Raya, their eyes locked in contest. A contest that Raya lost. Yes, she says, forcing the truth out of her mouth, harsh as the burning cold. A few hours ago, the priests sent knights to your village. They will arrive soon. We are offering to bring you to a safe place for a while. The woman meets Lilith's mother's gaze with deference. If your parents will allow us, Lilith's mother writes, we can protect our own. Why should we trust the kindness of a villager? Then Raya's mother follows. How do we know they will be safe with you? Quill's father hesitates before adding, where will you take them? When will we be able to see them again? The rest of the crowd lift their spellbooks in the air, messages scrawled in crooked, furious strokes. that reminded Raya of the warning signs written with animal blood and placed before the forest path. You take our voices, our magic, and now you want our children? Leave. You are not welcome here. Lilith tugs on her mother's tunic sleeve, insistent, like a furry blood moon moth drawn to a candle. They're only trying to help. That's what the priests say, replies Quill, with an annoyed scoff. Rhea closes her eyes, trying to put up a mental fortress around her mind, blocking out the argument. She still remembered the long, tortuous walk from the church orphanage as she left the village. A man smelling faintly of bread spat on her feet. Someone wearing a silk dress called her a sorcerer, slut. When she tripped and fell on her feet, a rosy-cheeked child took the opportunity to throw rotten fruit at her back. Despite having a priest for company, Raya knew that she was alone. But when she opens her eyes again, the memory of the villagers fade, and all Raya sees are two people who ventured through the cold wilderness to protect 3 children they'd never met from knights. Standing alone, Raya addresses the crowd. I think that they've come all this way. We should at least hear what they have to say. My wife, Vea, has a sister that lives in a cottage on the other side of the sea in Whaley's Fair. Your children would be staying there. You could come visit whenever you wished, so long as you were not followed by knights. The man takes a step away from the crowd, giving them some privacy. Whatever your choice may be, we will understand. His eyes turn far more distant than the few paces between them. We know the loss of being separated from a child, as heated conversations fade to concerned murmurs, leaving torn messages from spell books crumpled and discarded in the snow. The parents turn to their children. One last message. It is your choice. Raya, Lilith, and Quill glance at each other, silently coming to an agreement. We'll go. The villagers called them children of the Forsaken, those exiled from society and their home in the Bear Claw Mountains. But the children called themselves the Watchers for their view of what others sometimes fail to see. To those who knew them, they were merely Raya Navarium, Lilith Skyden, and Quill Weston, the children who defied the silence of death like the Risen. Haunting, Jack couldn't speak. He could only scream as he woke up to the sound of his mother's voice, whispering to him from the corner of his dark bedroom. Of course, it wasn't actually his mother. He knew that. How could it be when she had died in a car accident just a little over a week earlier? Jack. Come over here, Jack. You can see me, can't you? Come over here, child. His chest was heavy, his bladder loose with fear. Looking over into the corner, as he flailed amidst his perspiration-damp sheets, he realized that he could indeed see something. The same something, in fact, that he had seen on that terrible night of his mum's demise, just minutes after his aunt, who had been babysitting him at the time, had received the phone call that would cause both of their worlds to come crashing down. She had broken the news to him, and he had seen it standing over by the window of his aunt's tiny living room. It had been at the funeral too, and now here it was again, invading the privacy of his bedroom this time, lurking in the corner, watching him, taunting him by speaking with his dead mother's voice. "Jack! Come here, Jack!" Now tears of terror spilled down his cheeks as he scrambled to sit up. His gaze was fixed upon the corner, on the hulking, dark outline of a man who stood there, wide and tall, so tall that its head almost brushed the ceiling. It had no face, no features. It was only visible because somehow it was even blacker than the darkness itself which suffused the room, blacker than the very night. How could that be? His screams tapered off as his throat constricted. From elsewhere in the house, he could hear the sound of frantic movements. His aunt had clearly been roused by his yells. Her footsteps raced across the landing, old floorboards groaning loudly. "I'll return, Jack. You can't avoid me forever." His mother's voice hissed quietly. The thing then scuttled, spider-like, across to the wall, and then through it, as though no barrier existed at all, as though the laws of physical matter simply did not matter to it one bit. The thing disappeared from his sight just as the bedroom door was flung open and the light snapped on to dazzle him with its bright glare. "Jack, Jack, are you all right?" His Aunt Alice stood there, looking pale and startled. Her resemblance to his mum, as always these days, struck him like a dagger through the heart. They had the same raven hair, just as he did himself, the same ice blue eyes, same sharp cheekbones, same thin lips. His mother's now stilled forever, whilst his aunt's were pinched in a worried frown as she approached the bed where he lay. "Sweetheart, what is it? Did you have a bad dream?" He shook his head. It was bad, all right, but it was no dream. He raised a trembling hand to point over at the corner where the thing had been standing, mocking him by its mimicking of his dead mother's voice as it tried to lure him in. Alice turned to look, but quickly brought her attention back to him. "There's nothing there, Jack. You just had a nightmare, that's all." Her gaze shifted, moving down over his sheets, where a damp stain alerted him also to the fact that he must have wet himself. He cringed, the tears coursing faster down his cold cheeks. What kind of a 12-year-old wet the bed? "It's all right," his aunt soothed. "I'll get those in the wash, and you can come and sleep with me in my bed for the rest of the night. It'll be dawn in a couple of hours anyway." And so saying, she ushered him out of his bed and took his hand to lead him over to her room. As always, it smelled strongly of lavender. After tucking him in, she retreated back to strip the damp sheets from his bed. Meanwhile, he lay there, alone once more in the darkness, eyes wide open, and frantically scanning the dark shapes all around him, lest the shadow should return again that night to torment him. All the while, the sound of his aunt's stifled sobs haunted his ears.
Chanta,
Abi, if you can hear me, please respond. I don't know what to do. He hasn't spoken a word since you died, and he seems so disturbed. He's been having night terrors, and Jack crept down the stairs, being careful to avoid the creaking steps. His skin was crawling, body covered in goosebumps, not from the cold, but from a renewed sense of fear. Peering over the banister, he saw his aunt in the living room. She was sitting with her back to him, cross-legged on the floor beside the coffee table. On the table itself, right in front of her, was a board, a wooden board with letters and numbers on its surface, the exact same kind of board as he remembered seeing his mother messing around with so many times before. Late in the evenings, after she'd had a bottle of wine. Abi, are you here with us? Please, Gyan. He wanted to run down the remainder of the steps, grab that board, and smash it to pieces, or burn it to ashes. For there was something about it that just seemed so very, very wrong. He was stopped in his tracks, however, by a sudden, sharp gasp from his aunt. She had her fingers resting on top of a small, circular piece of glass, which rested atop the board. And as he watched, the piece of glass slid free of Alice's grip and went spinning away, clearly moving of its own volition. It raced in jagged lines all across the board. Jack felt dizzy at what he was seeing. His legs gave way beneath him as he sank down onto one of the steps, his buttocks slamming painfully hard against the bare wood. Candlelight leapt in the room before him, the multiple flames flickering wildly. A muffled groan rumbled deep in his chest. Alice did not turn around. She was far too intent upon whatever message was being spelled out to hear him. He watched as she snatched up a nearby notebook and pen, scribbling frantically as she noted down what she was seeing reveal itself before her, never taking her eyes off the board. Eventually, the glass fell still. Something stirred in the air. The candle stuttered. His aunt gave a shiver, and Jack watched as the shadow man emerged through the closed door into the kitchen, moving to stand right beside Alice, reaching out with one of its thick arms as though to touch her. Another gust of wind blew through the room, carrying on it the stench of something rotting. Unable to take it anymore, Jack scrambled to his feet and ran back up the stairs. He cowered in his aunt's bed, covers pulled up over his head. As in the room below, he heard her begin to scream. Cliffhanger by Lee Kendrick. I had never been to a tropical country before, but Indonesia was my friend's, and I chose a holiday destination after we had scanned the internet for tropical countries. We all agreed to go to the Indonesian island of Sumba, an island as large as Jamaica. Apparently, Indonesia boasts the most islands of any country. Unbelievably, over 17,000. My friends Michael, Bob, and I, Dave, had booked a holiday here for 2 weeks. We planned to do some snorkeling, exploring the coral reefs, and go on some boat trips to some of the Indonesian islands. For now, we were just chilling out on a sun lounger, drinking cold beers on the white sands of the Mbawana beach. The Sumba Island landscape is so rich in exotic plants and animal life. It also boasts unusual rock formations, including the Halfling Giant Stone. This is a coastal rock with a large gaping hole through it. In fact, me and the boys are just 30 feet away from it to our left. Another unusual thing about Indonesia is the Indian Ocean. It changes color, varying from turquoise to ultramarine blue to a remarkable golden orange. Another thing this part of the world is known for is its earthquakes and tsunamis. Just a few minutes ago, we felt a heavy earthquake, but this was normal for Indonesia. We were glad we weren't in a city full of buildings. The tremor only lasted for about 20 seconds, and then it just fizzled out. Nothing to worry about. Feeling hot, I decided to go for a dip in the ocean. As I slowly walked in the soft, powdery white sand towards the ocean, I sensed a foreboding. And for some reason, I noticed it was taking me longer than usual at this time of day to arrive by the ocean. I also observed pools of seawater with seaweed, crabs, and other sea creatures, which weren't there before. And I'm sure by now I would have been hearing the waves come crashing onto the beach. But the ocean seems much further away. Then it dawned on me as I stared out into the distance. There it was, a few miles away, a massive wall of water. Difficult to measure, but I would say it must be at least 50 feet high, and it was heading towards the beach. It was a tsunami. I had heard in documentaries about how the ocean suddenly withdraws from a beach, heralding a tsunami. Is this my time to die? I thought. I turned and ran as fast as I could, back towards my friends, wearing my stupid flip-flops. As I ran, I observed dozens of people lying on their beach towels, oblivious to what was about to happen. I attempted to shout to warn them, but no words would come from my mouth. I was unable to speak because I was in the grip of fear. I managed to attract a couple's attention, but they just waved back at me and continued sunbathing. I picked up a heavy shell and threw it at them, and then pointed frantically towards the wall of death I ran and ran, painfully slowly, getting closer towards my friends. Then my friends Michael and Bob saw me. I waved with both hands, frantically in desperation, to try and warn them as I pointed back to the ocean. They just seemed to ignore me. Finally, I reached Michael and Bob to pull them away. My larynx was constricted, paralyzed. I couldn't utter one word as I pointed back towards the ocean. A bloody, gigantic blue-green wave was only a couple of 100 yards away. By now, there were people screaming everywhere on the beach. We all started running. But where? Where do we go? Do you climb a tree? The waves are too high. Do we try to outrun it? No. It's too close behind us, and it must be moving at over 100 per now. Do we go left or right? Maybe the wave isn't as long as the beach. Very unlikely we could escape it. It probably stretches as far as the length of the beach. We kept on running in front for our lives. As the adrenaline coursed through our veins, I spotted the cliff some 50 yards away. The tsunami was now so close behind us, you could hear its thunderous roar, like a wild beast after its prey. As we managed to reach the cliff, we climbed as rapidly as we could, managing some 30 feet, when the wave crashed heavily into the cliff. It demolished the halfling giant stone and engulfed the surrounding area. The beach had been swallowed up, and the ocean continued to climb, moving closer towards us. This wild beast wasn't done until it caught up with us, all three of us, now exhausted, and, like a gazelle, tired out with all its energy, spent. It was ready to drop and resign its fate to the beast chasing after it. I knew it was just only seconds away before the wave would claim me and my two friends. Suddenly, my heart stopped beating. To my horror, I was unable to lift my leg up to a ledge. It had got entangled in some plant's tendrils. Bob and Michael were too busy escaping to not notice me in trouble. The water was now up to my ankles as I frantically moved my foot to budge it free. The boat just wouldn't move. By now, I resigned to the fact that I was going to drown. As a 26-year-old, I was hoping for longer on this earth, and I just wish Bob and Michael escaped the wave. The water was now rising up to my neck. I closed my eyes and saw flash images of my mother, dad, sister, and brother. But wait a moment. Why hasn't the water covered me yet? I thought. The next thing I noticed was the water level was going down. It was now down to my feet, and I was able now to budge my foot free. The water was drawing slowly away, down to where the ocean and beach would normally meet. I looked up to the top of the cliff, and there, looking down, were my two buddies, Michael and Bob, waving to me, laughing. We all had a miracle escape. Sadly, many tourists didn't, and I dreamed of heaven. There's a smell to to death. And I'm not talking about the stench of rotting fat and escaping gases. It's the smell of death's presence. It changes the air molecules to make them sour. They slice your nose as you inhale, and they grate against your skin as you walk through its cloud. The effect lingers. The more bodies, the more intense it is. Like a heat map of last breaths, there wasn't a pure atom in the basement. It was suffocating. I was sitting against the wall. My dead eyes pointed to the sky, and my dropped chin pointed to Earth's core. My hands were blue, and my face was pale. My legs were twisted in such an uncomfortable way, but there was nothing I could do. Literally. I couldn't even breathe, because there was no breath to circulate, and my blood could no longer flow, because most of it was on the wall. So it seemed that I would be uncomfortable for eternity. But what's new? Even when I used to lay in the most comfortable position on a bed of clouds and fat puppies, it would only take an hour before I was forced to move again. Comfort is only a distant hope, after all, occasionally swooping down to give us a kiss on the cheek, only to fly away again. It offered a good chase, at least, but now it's gone, and it's never coming back. I can see its wings flap and flap, but its image only shrinks. Goodbye, little bird, and so my legs will stay. I don't even know who these people are next to me, beyond being an undesirable, of course. I always thought it would be my wife or children. Hell, even a neighbor in their place. But who are they? I don't know them. I've never seen them in my life, except maybe a passing glance or so. And yet, here they are. No one would ever want to imagine their coffin being shared with strangers. It's not fitting, I'll tell you that. And who pulled the trigger? I didn't recognize any of them either. When a man is put in such a position as I, isn't the smallest, most bare minimum honor you could give him is to at least let him see a familiar face before the black veil is draped. Even a simple photograph would suffice. Does their cruelty know no bounds? And what a disgusting day for it to happen. A clear, warm week ahead without a cloud on the radar. Yet they chose the only stormy day as the day. The rapping of the rain against the basement window was incredibly distracting, and all I had to do was stand still. I can't imagine the ruckus for the men with the job, but alas, it goes how it goes, just as it always does. Nothing new, nothing new. When my consciousness expired, there was a very bright light, just as you're told that you would see. It was like I was tied to the nose of a rushing train that was exiting a tunnel. I wasn't scared. I was intrigued, I suppose, but weary. It didn't seem like the light was growing as you'd expect, but it was still clear that we were bound to collide. And so we did. I then entered a still ocean, hovering over it, as if I was sitting on top of a floating rug. I looked around, and there was nothing that rose above the floor of shimmering water, completely level. I waited for some sort of figure to appear, an angel or guide, but no one came. I was alone. There was a thick white fog, more of a cream color, actually, and it was smothering everything, especially the horizon. The sky was the same color. I suppose it was more of a calm mist than a fog, if that makes sense. I stayed above the water, simply watching the mist, and I found myself entirely at peace. There was no tension or wonder. It felt right, natural, ethereal. Then the day succumbed to a wicked night. Everything was dark and ugly. But something in me knew everything was there, just as it was earlier. The water danced in an invisible moonlight, and due to the darkness, it was no longer water, but an eerie liquid. For the first time, I became aware of the possibility that the liquid might touch me, and it was terrifying. I couldn't say why. It's the same experience as seeing a familiar item in your bedroom turn into a demon when the lights go off. You know what it is and what it isn't, but you have nothing to prove it. And so, it was a demon. I found myself on the run again, but the reins were still out of my control. I soared through the dark mist to a sort of cave with a light echoing from its depths. Yet this light was only an illuminance in its vibrancy and not color. It was blacker than anything else in sight. You could shine the most intense beam of real-world light into the cave's exhaust, and the darkness would devour every ounce of it. There was no overshadowing its power. I was slurped into this cave like blood down a drain. And when I woke, I was surrounded by 4 things. They were human in their shape and size, but their faces and direct appearance were revolting, like bloody brain matter paired with the sensation of swallowing a razor blade. It's impossible to convey their grotesqueness, and they were in pain. They were suffering, whatever they were. I was lying flat on the cave floor, looking at them, all standing over me. They were studying me in teary-eyed horror. Just as I studied them, they were afraid and sad and grossed out. I was a brutal crime scene, and they were an innocent child. Their spirits yearned for an opportunity of hesitation, while their bodies functioned autonomously. They lifted me up like I was in a stretcher. Then they carried me through the cave, mostly keeping their vision to their path of travel, but occasionally sneaking a glance against their will at whatever I was to them. They placed me on a cold table and backed off, fighting themselves to sever the tie between their eyes and me. Then they were gone. All I could see was a wet cave ceiling. I knew a figure was next to me. I closed my eyes. It rolled its feet as it moved along my left side, doing seemingly nothing other than being present and busy. I don't know if it wanted me to open my eyes. It dared me to, but I would never. The ringing of complete silence was giving me the feeling of a terrible migraine. I couldn't relax because the figure was there, so I stayed alert and ready, as if there were some sort of instructions to be heard or questions to be asked. But there were none. No sound, no feel, only dread. Something was coming. Something was going to happen. It was racing to me. But there was nothing outside of the expectation of it to tell me. The figure paced. I didn't know what the figure looked like, and I would never dare to satisfy that curiosity. It wanted me to see it so that it could punish me. Like a bully hovering in your peripheral vision, waiting for you to make eye contact so it could warrant abuse. But the figure, what abuse was in its arsenal? I was inflating with the shivers of dread, the heat of its vibrations cooking me like a bowl of popcorn. The figure was by my feet, my unprotected, naked feet. It wasn't doing anything yet, but of course, it was getting ready for something. Something big. I never realized how soft and sensitive the skin on my feet was until then. I expected the Lord to be here, but he wasn't. What are the rules if the rules I lived by didn't work? I don't even know if I had skin or a body or anything other than my perception. I would never open my eyes to see. If my skin was still attached, it must have shaken itself loose by now. Trembles of this magnitude would bring down even the strongest city. It's on my right side now. What's it doing there? Why there? My left side is empty, exposed, naked. There's fidgeting behind me. Metallic clinking, shuffling. But it's delicate and gentle. There's no rush to it, like an assassin taking his time to thread on a suppressor. His mind is in the clouds, and his hand is on the gun. How could one smile in a time such as that? The figure isn't smiling, though, I'm sure. It's all business for it, nothing more. A freezing chill tickles my scalp, near where the figure is hovering. What is it doing? Wait, it left. There's no door to close, but some sort of barrier is now between it and me. It's gone, but I can still feel it moving through the cave, as if I have a map of its layout. I'm alone. My eyes will stay shut. I've decided it. I'm not risking it, not for anything. It'll come back. The figure, it'll come back without a doubt. It's getting something for me. I know it. But what? Or is that it? Is it done? Or will there be more? Has it even started yet? What is it? I don't know anything, but I know enough to not be ignorant. There's something coming. It's on its way. But why am I here? What is here? Does everyone go here? Oh, it's back. The figure is back. They're coming. They're coming. The whispers carried by the wind. The repeat of words started yesterday morning from the moment my bare feet touched the wooden planks of the wrapped-around porch. The corn swayed slowly. Anticipation, knowing they would soon pick up their speed. Sounds of the horses shifting around the fields, anxiety fueling them. They knew. They knew just as well as I did what was to come. The clouds in the distance were dense. The light around the house shined bright for now. The blanket of clouds would take that away. Soon, too soon. The pitter-patter of little feet sounded from behind me. A hand wrapping around my finger, giving a slight tug. Her bright blue eyes would be boring into me. Those beautiful eyes she adopted from her father. If only he was here, they wouldn't be coming. They would leave us be. They would keep their distance. They knew what the consequences were, but no contact, no letters, no information of where he was or when he would come home, left us in the foreboding shadows. The war was bound to come. Unfortunately, we knew that. The day the papers came, he looked at me. The look of knowing all too well. He would be called upon, leaving us to fend for ourselves, while he went God knows where, to defend the great land we call home. The last letter received was over a month ago now. We sent one in return within the week. Concerns the officers would come bringing devastating news filled the house, weighing the air down. Another tug released me from my trance. I looked down, mustering a smile as best I could. Guiding her back into the house, setting her up in the chair for breakfast. Eggs, toast, and fresh bacon from one of the sows lay in front of her. Coffee was the choice for me. Hunger was gone. I felt nothing of the sorts. Thirst controlled me. Coffee, water, and milk satisfied me for the time being. A bang sounded outside. My eyes snapped to see through the fogged window from grime. Something else to add to my list of things to do. The dust and dirt picking up from the fields created a layer. A goat was taking time to practice butting again, lining up to go again with one of the poles surrounding them. The clouds were closer. Too much to do before they would be here. Too little time. Another tug. This time, my dread. I felt the hole in the side tear a little bit more. Another thing to fix around this place. I turned. Her shoes were on her feet, and mine were in her hands. The plate behind her was polished off, and the cup with remnants of milk sat beside it. Her head cocked to the side. A nod returned. Sliding my feet into my boots, we headed out to accomplish the never-ending tasks plaguing us. Night fell quickly, and the clouds were almost here. By morning, they would be on top of us. The sounds of the restless animals in the barn through the open window next to my bed. Creaks of the old house moving with the wind called out in various parts. The nerves, the knowing of what's coming, getting to me, all while she slept peacefully in her bed. No worries in the world, aside from making sure the animals were happy, and her father was okay. The adolescent hopes and dreams occupying her mind. Mine was screaming at me. Too many thoughts, too many fears, all flicking through, ready to explode out. The hope of tea helping the pain and pressure, all while it did nothing at all. It usually did not. But I lived by it, as my mother had too. Lessons she taught me, guided me quite frequently. That being just one of them. They're coming. I shuddered with the wind as it brought that news. Constant reminders. I wanted to scream out. I know all too well. Instead, I stayed quiet, fighting to go to sleep to earn some peace. Peace would not come, however. My dreams would be filled with thoughts of them coming. My husband, my child not getting everything they need. The idea of peace is just that. An idea, a hope. There was none for me. The sounds were pounding by the time my eyes opened. Light barely came through the windows. The clouds were here, and so was the shadow. My feet pounded, carrying me out onto the porch. The corn stalks now looked like they were laying down, the wind rearing its ugly face. They're coming, they're coming, they're coming. The words pounded into me. My eyes watered, dirt flying into them. I felt my way to the sink, rinsing them out as best I could. Turning, she was behind me again, head cocked to the side. Quickly fixing oatmeal, she ate while I worried. Opting to give her time off today, I set her up with her favorite things in the living room. Not before getting her dressed in her Sunday best. No hair out of place, and a bow matching her shoes. The wind howled outside. They're coming, quickly. I needed to get everything done, quickly. Forgetting my shoes, I headed to the barn, multitasking, not without dropping things. The grime now covered me, just as it did the windows. Hurry, you must hurry. Stepping out of the barn, a cloud of dust was nearing. Pounding of horseshoes coming down the way, carried with the wind, just as the words did. They're coming, minutes, a matter of minutes, and they would be here. The dust rounded the drive at the far end of the field. My feet ran me into the house and to the bathroom. Grabbing a cloth, I wet it down and scrubbed at my flesh. The grime coming off, slowly it felt. I was running out of time. Finally, getting the last mark off, I put my Sunday best on, running my fingers through my hair. Standing in the doorway, she was beside me, watching the cloud of dust get closer. They're coming. The wind howled again. They're coming. In the silence of ashes, Jacob's fingers trembled against the dented tin cup, water sloshing perilously close to the rim. The November air carved his lungs raw, bitter with smoke from chimneys that transformed flesh to ash. His worn shoes navigated the mud between barracks, sidestepping puddles that mirrored a colorless sky. At 13, Jacob had perfected invisibility. 3 years of silence, not by choice, but necessity after witnessing his father's execution, had rendered him a ghost among the living dead that shuffled through the camp. While other boys his age had been selected for immediate disposal, Jacob's muteness had ironically preserved him. The guards found utility in a servant who could never repeat their secrets, who existed in the peripheral shadows of their consciousness. The SS officers spoke freely in his presence. Plans whispered, transports scheduled, executions ordered, all captured in the flawless vault of Jacob's mind, where every detail existed in perfect recall, a gift that had once earned him praise from teachers in another lifetime. Before yellow stars and cattle cars, Obersturmführer Kruger waited in his usual spot, a folding chair positioned in the sliver of shade beside Barracks 7. Jacob knew the man's habits with precision. The hat removal, 17 minutes into his shift. The triple tap of his boot before sitting. The heavy eyes, exactly 40 minutes after lunch. Schneller, Junge! Kruger barked, gesturing impatiently as Jacob approached. Jacob quickened his pace, keeping his eyes fixed on the shallow pool of water in the cup. One did not look directly at the gods of this underworld, the men who decided with casual flicks of their fingers who would breathe another day and who would feed the insatiable furnaces. Kruger snatched the cup, gulping noisily. Water escaped his lips, tracking through the dust on his chin. Jacob stood motionless, hands clasped before him, awaiting dismissal or further orders. The guard's eyes were bloodshot, the whites yellowed like old paper. Night duty in the processing center, Jacob surmised. New transports had arrived yesterday, which always meant sleepless shifts for the guards. Wait, Kruger muttered, settling deeper into his chair. I might want more. Jacob nodded once, the barest acknowledgement of the command. He knew stillness, as others knew prayer. A ritual of survival, practiced until it became reflex. The camp existed in constant motion, guards shouting, prisoners shuffling, machine guns occasionally stuttering their terrible poetry of death. To be still was to disappear. Minutes stretched. Kruger's head gradually lolled forward, his breathing deepening. The cup tilted dangerously in his loosening grip. Jacob watched through lowered lashes as the guard surrendered to sleep. The keys hanging from Kruger's belt caught the weak sunlight, transforming ordinary metal into something mythic. Freedom incarnate. Jacob's pulse accelerated, blood rushing in his ears like distant artillery. No guard ever slept on duty. The punishment was severe. Perhaps not death, but certainly disgrace. This aberration might never repeat itself. A singular crack in the impenetrable wall of captivity. Jacob's mind calculated with the precision of mathematics. 4 minutes until the patrol passed the northern fence. 7 minutes until roll call at the women's barracks would divert attention eastward. The electric generator hummed 60 meters to the west, powering the final barrier between imprisonment and possibility. His fingers, trained by years of obedience, trembled with rebellion as they reached toward the key ring. A lifetime compressed into a single breath as metal brushed against metal with the whisper of butterfly wings. The ring slid free. Jacob backed away silently, the keys clutched against his chest like a talisman. The dormant power they represented sent electric currents through his body, awakening nerves long numbed by survival. For the first time in 3 years, a ghost became solid. A shadow contemplated substance. A boy allowed himself to remember the concept of hope. The keys felt impossibly heavy in Jacob's pocket as he slipped between the skeletal shadows of barracks. His mind projected every detail of the camp upon the canvas of his consciousness. A perfect map etched by thousands of forced errands. There, the blind spot behind the infirmary, where guards rarely patrolled. Here, the drainage ditch that ran beneath the eastern fence, partially obscured by withered weeds. Each movement demanded precision as afternoon shadows stretched across the packed earth. Jacob became one with them. Another darkness moving among darkness, his emaciated form barely disturbing the air. The camp's architecture revealed itself differently now. What had been a prison became a puzzle box, and Jacob held the solution in his trembling hand. 327 steps to the generator shed, a left turn at the kitchens, skirt the infirmary, avoid the dogs kenneled near the northern guard tower. Gunther, the shepherd with the white spot on his muzzle, raised his head as Jacob passed downwind. The animal's ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring. Jacob froze, becoming stone. The dog's amber eyes held his for an eternal moment before dismissing him. Just another walking skeleton, carrying neither food nor threat. Jacob released the breath he'd been holding and continued his careful trajectory toward freedom. The world had shrunk to immediate sensations. Ribs against lungs, the metallic taste of fear, fabric against skin. Nothing existed beyond this moment of movement, this singular pursuit of escape. A sudden commotion erupted near the eastern fence. Jacob pressed himself against Barracks 12, becoming one with its weathered planks as two guards rushed past. Not for him, not yet. The keys remained undiscovered. As the guards disappeared, Jacob continued his journey through the camp's service areas, places where a silent child became as invisible as dust motes in sunlight. He reached the narrow passage between buildings where mud gave way to gravel, treacherous ground that might announce his presence. Jacob moved with the deliberate care of a tightrope walker, testing each step. A soft sound stopped him. A whimper, barely audible, drifting from beneath the elevated supply depot. Jacob hesitated, freedom calling from just beyond. The sensible choice was clear. Continue. Escape, survive. Yet he found himself crouching, peering into the darkness beneath the structure. 5 pairs of eyes reflected the meager light. Children, younger than himself, huddled together like rabbits in a warren. Their gaunt faces registered shock at his discovery. One boy raised a finger to cracked lips, pleading for silence that Jacob had mastered years ago. They had escaped a selection. That much was obvious. Children deemed too small for work were immediate candidates for the chambers. These 5 had somehow slipped away, hiding in this temporary sanctuary, while death searched elsewhere. Jacob knew their fate was sealed. The hiding place would be discovered within hours. The dogs would find them, or hunger would drive them into the open. Their brief rebellion against inevitability would end as all rebellions did in this place, with smoke rising from chimneys. His hand closed around the keys in his pocket. One boy, for certain, could navigate the camp's dangers. 5 children multiplied the risk exponentially. Mathematics again. Probability, chance, the cold equations of survival. The smallest child, a girl with eyes too large for her hollowed face, extended one skeletal hand toward him, not begging, not pleading, offering connection, humanity. Something the camp had systematically stripped away layer by layer until only animal survival remained. Jacob's memory flashed to his father's final words before the guards beat him silent. Remember who you are. He made his decision with quick, efficient gestures. Jacob motioned for them to follow. The children untangled themselves from their hiding place, emerging like shadows gaining substance. Their movements were clumsy with fear and weakness, but their eyes held absolute focus on Jacob, their unexpected savior, their silent Moses. The smallest girl slipped her hand into his. Her palm was fever hot against his cold fingers. The contact sent electricity through Jacob's arm, awakening something long dormant. Responsibility, connection, purpose beyond mere survival. Together, they became a small constellation of desperate stars, moving through the gathering twilight toward the generator shed and the possibility of freedom beyond. The generator shed vibrated at the camp's edge. Its drone masked 6 pairs of feet, navigating between the fences as Jacob led with a cartographer's confidence. Evening patrol would begin in 17 minutes. Searchlights would sweep the eastern perimeter in 12. The rhythm of the camp's security beat within Jacob's consciousness, like a second heartbeat. The smallest girl, her name yet unspoken between them, clung to his hand with surprising strength. Behind them, the other children followed in a chain of desperate hope, each grasping the clothing of the one ahead. Their collective breath formed ghostly plumes in the November air, spectral evidence of lives not yet extinguished. Jacob reached the generator shed's rusted door. 3 keys tried, 3 keys rejected, before the 4th slid home. The lock surrendered with a reluctant click that seemed thunderous in his heightened awareness. He ushered the children inside, pulling the door closed behind them. Darkness enveloped them, broken only by the red glow of indicator lights. The smell of oil and metal replaced the camp's perpetual stench of suffering. The generator's pulse vibrated through the concrete floor into their bones. Jacob's memory reconstructed the shed's interior with perfect clarity. He had been brought here once to clean grease spills, one of countless menial tasks assigned to the camp's silent shadow. His fingers traced metal casings and wire housing until he found what he sought, the main control panel. Behind him, the children huddled together for warmth and courage. The oldest boy, perhaps 10, whispered something in Polish that Jacob couldn't understand. The words dissolved into the mechanical growl surrounding them. Language had become irrelevant. Only action mattered now. Through the shed's single grimy window, Jacob watched lights flicker on across the camp as day surrendered to evening. Searchlights awakened, their harsh beams cutting white arcs through gathering darkness. Guards emerged from barracks, rifles slung across shoulders. Somewhere, Obersturmführer Kruger would be awakening to the realization of his catastrophic error. Jacob's hands hovered over the generator's controls. His perfect memory recalled every wire, every connection observed during his brief exposure to the machine's inner workings. Disabling it would plunge the camp into darkness and deactivate the electrified fence. But the backup systems would engage within minutes. Their window for escape would be measured in heartbeats. A distant alarm shattered the twilight, a shrill mechanical scream that announced discovery. Whether Kruger's missing keys or the children's absence had triggered it remained unknown. The distinction was academic. The hunt had begun. The smallest girl, pressed herself against Jacob's side, her body trembling like a captured bird. He placed a reassuring hand on her head, then turned his attention back to the generator. Its massive form contained both their imprisonment and their salvation. Jacob seized a wrench from a nearby workbench and wedged it between critical gears. With calculated force, he twisted until metal screamed against metal. Sparks erupted in blue-white constellations, reflected in the wide eyes of the watching children. The generator's rhythm faltered, coughed, then disintegrated into mechanical death throes. Lights across the camp flickered, dimmed, and died. Darkness descended like a blessing, punctuated only by the crimson pulse of emergency lights and the distant, frantic beams of guards' flashlights. Jacob yanked the shed door open. Freedom waited in the gathering night, separated from them by a single fence now rendered harmless. He gestured urgently to the children, pointing toward the eastern boundary, where forest began 200 meters beyond the perimeter. Dogs barked in the distance, savage, hungry sounds that accelerated their terror into action. The children poured from the shed like water finding its level, Jacob bringing up the rear. The smallest girl's hand remained locked in his as they navigated by instinct and starlight toward the fence. With his free hand, Jacob tested the metal mesh. No electricity hummed beneath his fingertips. The backup generators had not yet engaged. He boosted the smallest children over first, their bird-like bodies barely disturbing the wire. The older ones climbed with desperate strength, tumbling to freedom on the other side. As searchlights swept closer and dogs barking intensified, Jacob hoisted himself upward, muscles straining against the weight of exhaustion and malnutrition. Barbed wire tore through his threadbare clothing, carving shallow furrows into his flesh. Pain registered as distant information, irrelevant to the imperative of movement. He dropped to the ground beyond the fence, landing beside the waiting children. The absent hum of electricity had been replaced by shouts and whistles, the camp awakening to their rebellion. Jacob pointed toward the dark line of trees in the distance. "Run," he mouthed silently, the word forming on lips that had forgotten speech. Together, they fled across open ground, 6 shadows merging with the greater darkness. Behind them, flashlight beams swept the area around the disabled generator. Ahead, the forest promised concealment, if not safety. The space between represented the most dangerous passage of their lives, exposed, vulnerable, illuminated by nothing but faith and starlight. The forest swallowed them whole. Pine needles cushioned their footfalls as the scent of resin replaced the camp's miasma with air that tasted of possibility. Jacob led them deeper into the wilderness, away from searchlights that strafed the forest edge like mechanical predators. Behind them, the camp's alarms continued their frantic cry, a sound that diminished with each step, but remained embedded in their consciousness like a splinter beneath skin. The smallest girl stumbled, her strength finally failing. Jacob caught her before she fell, lifting her slight weight into his arms. She weighed no more than autumn leaves, her bones fragile as a bird's, beneath his hands. Her head came to rest against his shoulder, absolute trust in the gesture. They continued for what might have been hours or minutes. Time had dissolved into meaningless abstraction. Distance alone mattered now. Every meter gained was a victory against death. The other children followed Jacob without question, their faith in his silent guidance absolute. A stream appeared, silver in the moonlight. Jacob gestured for them to drink. The water tasted of stone and stars, reviving something beyond their physical bodies. Perhaps hope, perhaps humanity. The oldest boy spoke, his voice a rusty hinge breaking the forest's solemn quiet. Müssen wir weitergehen? Must we go further? Jacob nodded, pointing deeper into the forest. The danger had not passed. Dogs could track them for kilometers. Morning would bring planes, searchers, consequences. The Reich did not surrender its prisoners easily, especially those who carried knowledge of what transpired behind electrified fences. The smallest girl stirred in his arms, her eyes reflecting fragments of moonlight. Her lips moved, forming words that emerged as a whisper. Jak się nazywasz? What is your name? The question penetrated layers of silence built over years of survival. Jacob hadn't heard his own name spoken aloud since his father's death. It existed only in memory, a secret thing preserved from contamination by the camp's horrors. His throat constricted around unspoken syllables. Speech had become foreign territory, a country from which he had been exiled. Yet something stirred within the wasteland of his voice, a seed breaking through frozen ground after endless winter. Jacob, he whispered, the sound strange and wonderful in the forest's embrace. His voice emerged broken, raw with disuse, but undeniably his own. Jestem Jacob. I am Jacob. The girl's smile transformed her hollow face, revealing the ghost of beauty that starvation had nearly erased. Estera, she replied, offering her name as a gift in exchange for his. The other children murmured their own names: Tomasz, Lilka, Beniek, David. Each syllable a reclamation of identity. The camp had attempted to replace with numbers. They stood in a tight circle beneath the ancient pines, no longer prisoners, not yet survivors, suspended in the fragile space between captivity and freedom. A distant howl shattered their momentary peace, the unmistakable voice of a tracking dog catching their scent. The hunt continued. Jacob set Estera gently on her feet and pointed westward, where the forest grew denser, offering deeper concealment. Musimy biec, Estera said with quiet resolve. We must run. Jacob nodded, taking her hand once more. Together, they plunged deeper into the wilderness. 6 children against an empire, armed with nothing but the desperate courage of those with nothing left to lose. The forest embraced them, branches parting to accept their flight, roots steadying their uncertain steps. Dawn found them huddled beneath a rocky overhang beside a wider stream. Exhaustion had claimed the younger children, while Jacob remained awake, listening to the forest's morning chorus, replacing the mechanized rhythms of captivity. Estera sat beside him, her slight shoulder pressed against his arm. Dokund Ijemi? Where are we going? She asked, her voice barely audible above the stream's gentle murmur. Jacob's mind, so accustomed to precision and calculation, could offer no certain answer. The geography of freedom remained unmapped territory. He had memorized every centimeter of captivity, but possessed no chart for liberation. The words came slowly. Na południe, du partyzantów. South, to the partisans. Rumors had circulated through the camp. Resistance fighters in the southern forests, Jews and Poles who had escaped, fighting with salvaged weapons and desperate courage. Perhaps only legend, perhaps salvation. Estera's small hand found his, fingers intertwining. Będziemy wolni. We will be free. Jacob looked at the sleeping children, at the forest stretching around them, at morning light filtering between trees. Freedom remained a distant shore, separated by hunger, winter, pursuit, and war. Yet for the first time in 3 years, possibility existed. He squeezed Estera's hand gently and discovered within himself the capacity for speech once more. Words emerged like water from stone, each one a small miracle of reclamation. Już jesteśmy. We already are. The forest absorbed his words, carrying them toward the lightening sky. Behind them, the camp continued its grim business. Ahead, war raged. But here, 6 children had rewritten the equations of their existence beyond barbed wire and numbered tattoos. Jacob tilted his face toward the breaking day, feeling warmth touch his skin. His voice, newly rediscovered, held steady as he spoke again. Not to Estera, not to the sleeping children, but to the memory of his father that he carried within. I remember who I am. The hunt never ends. You thought that we wouldn't find out, didn't you? The note read. The man had shivered when he had read those ominous words, as perspiration began to drip down from his temple, the salty liquid seeping into his eyes and temporarily blinding him. This is the end, the man had said to himself in an agitated, trembling whisper as he looked down at the sheet of notepaper which had been left on his office desk. He glanced around at the other employees to see if anyone was looking his way, giving him some indication on who had left the message. But all of them were engaged in their own little world of toting up the facts and figures which were constantly coming through on their computer terminals. What had caused this man to turn deathly white and feel so nauseous? How had those 9 little words on the page that had now turned his world completely upside down come to cause him so much anguish and despair? That unhappy event had happened a week before. So let us now find out what had caused this man, Henry Miller, to end up in this now distressing location where he now found himself. At this moment, he was looking between the slats of a Venetian blind, observing the street outside, and trying as best as he could to remain unseen from the road in front of the building, where he now cringed, frightened out of his wits. How had it come to this? He thought. Last week, he didn't have a care in the world. All was going well at work. And then came that note, and he found himself involved in something that had instantly changed his life. And now he was on the run, constantly looking over his shoulder. And at this moment, hiding in this abandoned building, a structure that had a large sign outside stating that it was condemned and would shortly be torn down. So, how long could he remain here before he had to find another place of sanctuary? The year is 1948. The war is over. After 6 years of bloodshed and butchery by a psychopath and his evil, willing collaborators, during which an estimated 80 to 100 million people had died or been murdered. The Nuremberg trials had finished, and many, many hundreds of German Nazi war criminals had found justice on the end of a rope for crimes against humanity. Then, there were some who had decided that a cyanide pill was a much quicker way to escape the noose of retribution. Others, seeing that the end was near, had made their getaway before the Russians entered Berlin and tortured them, finding their way to South America, where many of them lived for a while, trying to evade the men from the Simon Wiesenthal organization, people dedicated to finding every last Nazi and bringing them to justice, headed by their leader, a man known as the Nazi Hunter, who was a Holocaust survivor. Even though many years have passed, the hunt still goes on, still finding those vile and depraved monsters, a subspecies of the human race. Although some are well into their dotage, justice is still being served. A particular case in point is the case of Adolf Eichmann, who, along with Heinrich Himmler, was the architect of the final solution, where 6 million Jews were sent to the death camps, only to be gassed, their bodies cremated, and the remains crushed. Eichmann was finally located in Argentina in 1961, thinking that after 16 years, he was safe. But justice caught up with him, and he met the Grim Reaper on the end of a rope a year later. But returning to Henry Miller, a man who had changed his name from Henrik Mengele and who had managed to escape from his home in Germany to live in Spain, a neutral country during the war, just after the conflict had begun. The surname he was born with, Mengele, was the same name as the man who was once revered by the Nazi Party for his inhumane and horrific experiments on unwilling participants. The infamous Dr. Joseph Mengele, a man given the name of the Angel of Death, a man, if indeed he could even be called that, who performed appalling and unspeakable experimentation on live inmates of the concentration camp at Auschwitz. Most of those subjects dying a lingering, painful, and agonizing death, all in the cause of making the so-called German master race into a nation of blue-eyed, blonde, Aryan supermen. But what had caused Henry to be reduced to his present situation? It was all due to that one large letter that he had found on his desk just over a week before, which caused him a great deal of torment. He had read the words, his trembling hands trying to stop the shaking that was coursing through his body. The words that read, "You thought that we wouldn't find out, didn't you?" For many years, he had feared that maybe someone, somewhere, at some time, might find out about his namesake and make his life a living hell, maybe even murder him, with the idea that he was in some way engaged in the work carried out by that misguided and psychotic mass murderer, and had, somehow, missed out on receiving the same fate that had befallen the other members of the Nazi death squads. But he had been so careful, and had never told anyone of his former name, or his possible relationship to the Angel of Death at Auschwitz. So, how could someone have found out where he lived or worked? The only way out that he could think of was to go on the run, getting well away from anyone he had worked with and from where he had lived. He had no plan, just a crazed idea that he must stay out of sight in this empty building before he made his next move. All sorts of wild ideas coursing through his brain. Thoughts that he had never even dreamt about, up until now, came into his mind. It was a few weeks later in the office where Henry had formerly been employed, a place from which he had mysteriously disappeared sometime previously, without explanation. One of the other employees who had worked with him had just read an article in the newspaper that had shocked him. It mentioned that his former workmate had been found dead in an abandoned building, having seemingly committed suicide by ingesting a cyanide pill. As tears welled up in his eyes, he murmured words that he found extremely difficult to say. "Henry, what happened? Why did you do it? Just as your friends here were organizing a surprise party for your birthday." You tried so hard to keep it a secret, and you thought that we wouldn't find out, didn't you? Unexpected turbulence. I catch myself staring into the bright blue space of nothingness as I instinctively prepare another cup of tea. Balancing myself with a wide stance, the tea swoops up around the cup, teasing a spill, as I manage to place it down for the woman in 12D. Her legs stretch out in front of her as she makes the most of the emergency exit row. I move down the next few rows, filling plastic cups with water and stale coffee. My mind is once again invaded with their final words to me. You're just asking for it, now being another glorified air waitress. What are you doing tonight, Soph? Krista asks, rearranging her white blouse and smoothing down her skirt as I start packing down the drinks cart. Just the usual, I guess. Wow, look at you spicing things up, she mocks, adjusting the pink scarf around her neck with perfectly manicured hands. The usual means I will be performing the same overnight trip routine of gym, jog around the city, order in cheap hotel food, and read a book. I once defied my better judgment and went out with Krista, but ended up having a panic attack in the bathroom. One of the guys at the bar had slipped an arm around my waist, and the touch of a stranger set off every warning sign in my body. I opted to get the next round of margaritas after pulling myself together, and my head didn't hit the hotel pillow until 3 a.m., before my alarm woke me up an hour later. The sunlight at this altitude is unforgiving on hungover eyes. So who are you planning on staying up with all night? I tease. Okay, so you remember how I told you about Matt? I hardly remember any of her friends' names, but I nod anyway. So he's in town and has invited over a couple of his friends from work. We are going to start at Gin Palace. You remember that cute place, right? Hidden door in the alleyway, a few lanes down from the hotel, bookcases on the wall, house music, and those huge wine glasses I like, but with all different types of fancy gin and tonics. With my back to her, as I stow away the trolley, I realize she's waiting for my confirmation. Oh yeah, I remember. Nice place. Unbothered by my obvious lack of interest, she continues. Anyway, we are starting there, and then we're trying a new spot nearby. Apparently, one of his friends knows a club that is all completely glow in the dark, and she's cut off by the sound of the seatbelt light turning on as the captain announces we are likely to experience turbulence. Our cabin manager signals us to make our way down the aisle to ensure everyone follows the instructions, stopping to help a mother of two buckle up her sticky-looking toddlers. I think about Krista and how she is so open to new experiences and people. I can already imagine how her night is going to go. She will greet her friends with a big smile, and they'll cheers to having a fun night ahead. They'll share laughs, gossip, travel experiences, and talk like they've known each other for years. She has that effect on people, myself included. A commotion seems to be happening down the back of the plane, but it doesn't sound unusual. It's probably another disgruntled passenger complaining about being restrained by the seatbelt sign. Sounds like another safety rebellion happening. I joke quietly as I meet Krista in the center of the cabin. Actually, it's some fancy businessman with an accent complaining he was assigned the wrong seat. She rolls her eyes. I think he's European, but not the sexy, swoony kind. My stomach drops from the mention of an accented businessman. I swallow the wave of anxiety and force a sarcastic smile. If only more swoony European tourists came here for holidays, hey? Well, I wouldn't be hanging out with Matt and his friends tonight. I'll tell you that. She quips. We're about 30 minutes from touchdown and about to prepare the cabin for landing. It has been a relatively easy flight. Everyone in my section seems content, and the disgruntled man appears to have quietened down. Our cabin manager approaches Krista and I. She asks us to continue scanning the rows further down while she checks in with the captain. The turbulence is almost unnoticeable as I walk toward the back of the plane, but I sense a few nervous flyers and reassure them it's okay. We're not far from our destination. Then I see him sitting in the aisle seat, second row from the back. Cold gray eyes stare right through me. His mouth curls into a tight, malicious grin. A sudden drop of the aircraft challenges my balance, and I grab onto the nearest headrest to steady myself. Apologizing to no one in particular, I turn around in disbelief. Looking over my shoulder, I check if it's just a cruel trick of my subconscious. The seat is empty. Terror begins to smother my body, and I feel my hands tremble. His face has haunted me before. I've seen him in train stations, in busy restaurants, and on crowded flights like today. I'm almost used to his memory penetrating my reality. I remind myself again that it won't be real, and my mind is playing tricks. A few confused faces bring me back, and I straighten up before retreating to the front of the plane. Pulling the curtain across behind me, I start to feel my throat close up. It's not real. He's not here. I was just imagining it. My hand is gripping my chest, as if to stop my heart from bursting out of me. The lavatory door is opened, then locked on the other side of the thin material, separating the passengers, oblivious to my silent distress. Calming my breaths to a steadier rhythm, I squeeze my elbows onto the small bench space in front of me and let my head fall into my hands. I sense I am no longer alone. The uniform suits you. Now I'm hearing things. My insides turn, and I feel vomit fighting its way up. You don't have to be shy. I know it's been a while. His words are thick with Syra, and an accent I haven't heard in over a year. My nose twitches as his cologne inches closer, infiltrating my airways with unbearable familiarity. Definitely real. I've missed you, he says casually, as if we are two old friends. I desperately will for Krista, or another attendant to interrupt the reunion, but I remain compromised. He's dangerous. I know this. A plane full of bystanders and a small crew of staff. What is he willing to risk? Before I am able to answer my own thoughts, I feel a cool touch to my lower back, and I stiffen. The hairs on my neck snap out like razor blades, and my blood turns to ice. Why won't you look at me, my dear? As his hand slides further up my back, I'm screaming for help, but no sound is leaving my mouth. I'm launching my knee into his ribs, but my legs are stuck in place. I'm reaching for the intercom, but my hands are locked together on my chest. A jolt knocks us both off our balance, and I'm able to swing out of his touch, only to find us face to face. He's shorter than I remember. Silver flecks scatter the sides of his thinning hair. He's even uglier than I remember. Sir, you can't be back here. Krista drifts past the curtain and pauses in between us. Get back to your seat now, please. Of course, my dear. Pausing to smirk before he exits. Are you okay? You look like you've just seen a dead body. Krista's face is filled with concern. I bite my tongue before responding with, I wish I had, and let her know I'm fine, just a little shaken from the bumpy ride. Oh, really? I can hardly feel a thing. She moves over to the CID's system and sets the lavatory lights to red. We'll be descending soon. I straighten up my blouse and pat under my eyes to make sure any signs of horror are blurred into my smooth, professional mask. So did Mr. Fancy Pants think he'd find his seat up here? What? I can hardly hear her over the ringing in my eardrums. The European guy with the accent. Was he pestering you about his seat? Oh, I force an eye roll. He just came too far up looking for the bathroom. Well, you'd think he's a regular flyer with that attitude. Wouldn't he know where the lavatories are on these planes by now? I shrug and move past her, pretending to be busy conducting final checks on the food and beverage lockers. Krista announces the instructions for our descent across the cabin intercom, then turns to me. I'm just going to do a final rubbish collection and seat check. You want to just wait here? You look a little pale. Yeah, if you don't mind. Thanks. I move to open up the jump seat and begin to strap myself in. Damn, I mutter. I forgot to pull back the curtain. My hands are still shaky from the monster behind it. I begin to release the seat belt and stand up, taking a deep breath in before I reach up for a handful of fabric. But a hand grabs mine first. My weight is suddenly whipped out from underneath me, and I'm falling. A wicked crack erupts from behind my ears. I can feel something warm and wet trickle down my back. You thought you could run away, and I would forget about you? He's hovering over me. Did anyone hear me fall? Bringing his slimy fingers to my face, he strokes my cheek. Paralyzed. I'm trying to run in a bad dream, but my legs won't move faster than a walk. I'm being chased, but my body has no sense of urgency. My mind is fighting to control a faulty vessel. His hand on my thigh makes me feel 18. "Oh my God!" I hear someone shriek. She fell. I was just checking on her. "Sophie, are you okay? What happened?" Krista bends down next to him, and I struggle to focus on which one of her swirling faces is real. I want to tell her to call for an emergency, but I can't seem to gather the words. She's an old friend. I can keep an eye on her if you get a first aid kit, he says, maintaining his cool composure next to me. Looking directly at him, she says, "Sir, you need to leave right now." Before she can say more, he thrusts his hand around her throat, and she is backed against the jump seat I was sitting on just a minute before. Awful screeches escape from her mouth as the veins grow by her temples. Her eyes search desperately. Watching my friend struggle for her life suddenly releases all the tightly wound ropes, holding me anchored to the floor. My hand reaches for the nearest cupboard, and a coffee pot extends from my arm and cracks down on his skull. I hit him again and again and again. "Soph," she croaks. "Sophie," Krista pleads, struggling to pull herself up from the ground. He is silent. Snapping back to my sense of self, I realize what I've done. The coffee pot drops from my hand, and a few wet drops slide off my face with it. "We need a doctor. Is anyone a doctor?" I yell, and hear the gasps echo down the aircraft. I was fresh out of high school and approaching my move-out date, assigned by my parents when I started working. It was said to be the best restaurant in town. We had regular guests from all over the world who stayed in the hotel above. I didn't notice it at first, how I was always rostered on the section of mostly dinner for once. I received generous tips and learned about the different places they were all from. I enjoyed being praised for my efforts and attentiveness during the meal. The mostly male and outspoken staff generally left me alone, which suited me just fine. Though occasionally they'd comment on my appearance, telling me I needed more makeup if I had tired eyes or to put on a smile when I was clearing tables. The manager would joke about my tight ass and even grabbed it once to check the merchandise in front of the kitchen crew. Mr. Ackerman would arrive every night at 5 p.m. and order a glass of Syrah when he was in town. He'd sink into the couch at the bar and chat to the staff about life in Europe and his work in the oil business. I caught his eyes scanning my movements a few times, but we didn't speak until I was placing the napkin at his table and asking, "The usual again, sir? Make sure you take good care of him." I was frequently reminded by my manager, Colin, at the mandatory Christmas work party. We had dinner at a local pub, and Colin insisted we joined him for drinks after. Once a girl refused these nights out drinking, and she shortly had her hours cut and tips reduced until she had no choice but to quit. At the bar, we ran into some of our regulars. Mr. Ackerman seemed pleased to see us and eyed my black dress thoroughly before delivering a sharp wink. "You should go chat with him. Keep up the good service, you know." my manager instructed with a pat on the ass, a glass of wine in hand. Courtesy of the man next to me, I sat there, struggling to answer the questions over the blasting music. I noticed how misplaced Mr. Ackerman was in his business casual attire, surrounded by partying patrons, 10 or 20 years his junior. "Sorry, I didn't hear you." I leaned into his side ever so slightly, struggling to keep any distance between us. His hand slid around my thigh in response. "I'll miss seeing you when I go back home." "I'm sure you'll be fine." There were flowers in my locker the following week, and a note saying he looked forward to seeing me again. I tried talking to Colin about how it made me uncomfortable and thought it was unprofessional. "Sophie, this is professional. You're making connections and bringing in regular money. Keep up the excellent work." He checked in a month later and greeted me with 3 kisses on the cheek during a busy service. I wanted to run. I wanted to wash his touch off in a scorching shower. Instead, I smiled and continued serving overpriced glasses of champagne. Then came dinner. Colin called me before my shift, asking me to wear the same black dress from the Christmas party. "It's a formal kind of occasion tonight. We need to be on an extra level." Too afraid to disobey, I reluctantly arrived with black kitten heels to match, only to find I was to be served that night instead of serving. Promised my pay as usual, plus a tip from the foreign businessman, I followed orders. We sat at the candlelit table and discussed his travels and work in the private dining room. I actively avoided any conversation directed back to me. A package with a silver bow was placed between us when the plates were cleared. "For you, my dear." I carefully unwrapped it to find an expensive-looking perfume. Only the best for my favorite girl. I don't know what to say. Forcing a smile, which ached my entire face. "Say nothing," he whispered, pulling my hand toward him before placing his lips on my skin. I resisted every urge to whip it away and smack his jaw, but I felt another pair of eyes on me. I glanced over to the room door to find my manager peering in, nodding in approval. Everyone knew. They all played a part in it. They helped print letters, deliver flowers, and even gave him my phone number. I was a pawn in their game. Mr. Ackerman must have offered more money than I could have imagined to the entire hotel staff. What other motive did they have? Or was it just a funny joke to them? What followed in the months after will stay with me for the rest of my life. I eventually cracked the morning after being requested to join Mr. Ackerman in his room for the night. I burst through the lobby and headed straight to the manager's office. I'd saved enough of my generous tips to book a flight to the other side of the world with an approved visa and an interview with an airline. I could finally escape. Colin laughed in disbelief of my resignation and career change. "You're just asking for it, now being another glorified air waitress." I dropped my apron on his desk and left without another word. going over the interaction in my head, making sure I didn't let it slip where the airline was based. The thud of the wheels touching down sends excruciating pain up my scalp as I continue applying pressure to my wound. Krista is sitting opposite me, with her face slowly returning to color, squeezing my hand. The emergency services are waiting at the gate, and I brace myself for the chaos about to erupt when we open the doors. I don't know what is going to happen. All I know is that my chest feels lighter, and I can breathe again. I spy with my little eye. It's funny, the things one thinks about when staring dramatically out the window. Even funnier, the things we do. I stopped racing raindrops a few miles back when I kept winning. My mother was right. Winning at everything gets unbelievably boring. Who knew a car window would teach me that lesson? Trailing my eyes lazily over the book on my lap, I deliberate. I could read, but that would mean turning on the overhead light, and I don't want what's out there to see me any better than it already does. Besides, reading in the back seat makes me nauseous. Sighing, I look out the window again. Dark skies press down on the trees, lining either side of the road, their jagged silhouettes barely visible beneath the moonlight. But I don't need to see them to know it is there. I can feel it, like the fabric of my clothes against my skin, like the weight of my own breath in my lungs. It's waiting, watching. It won't be able to follow us past the state line, not when it's tied by its grave, deep in the very forest it now lurks in. If we can just keep moving, if we don't stop, my fingers tighten around the seatbelt, because in the trunk, wrapped in tarps, are knives. The blood on them should be drying, crusting over. But that doesn't matter. It won't be the knives that get us caught. It'll be it. The road stretches endlessly. Twin lines of paint vanishing into the dark. The wipers squeak against the windshield, streaking rainwater instead of clearing it. The radio hums static beneath the commercials, like an unspoken warning. To whom, though? You see it? Bex asks beside me. Out of the four of us, she's freaking out the worst. I've long since put a barrier between our seats to avoid the worst of her rocking and jittery libs. I give her another flat look, hoping this one will shut her up for the rest of our trip. If I did, don't you think I would have said something by now? She whimpers and turns back to her own window, staring wide-eyed at the trees. I meet Rick's eyes in the rearview mirror, and Theo side-eyes me from the passenger seat. None of us say a word. In truth, I can see it. The shifting shadow that vaults across the street every few feet before melting into the trees. It got so out of hand. It was never. No, we did mean to do it. We just didn't think it'd come back to bite us like it did. Is doing. What's also true is that Bex will not be making it past the state limits with us. She can't be trusted. The minute everything was done and buried. She broke. Broken things aren't always fixable, and she is one loose end we cannot risk letting go, or it would end. We were all screwed. Rick blinks twice. I inhale deeply, sighing quietly through my nose. This is part of the plan. It won't chase us past the state limits, because it can't. But it also will have no incentive to do so. It's why we let Bex do it in the first place. Theo hums and raises the volume on the radio. Commercials, figures. Rick blinks one more time. The locks click, lightning flashes, bleaching Bex's side of the car in stark white. She yelps, flinching away from the window. I take my chance, sliding closer and pulling her into an embrace. It'll be okay, I whisper into her hair. Bex clutches at me, desperate. I let her. Everyone deserves comfort in the end. I swallow down my goodbyes. Theo coughs. I kick at his seat. Shut it, my hit says. The timing needs to be right. A shift in the trees. Closer now. The weight of something pressing against the night. Watching. Expectant. Do you hear that? Bex whispers, voice barely there. Like scraping. I don't answer. Because she doesn't hear scraping. She hears breathing. Shh. Nothing's there. You are just hearing things. I finally say, petting her hair. She doesn't feel me slide her seatbelt off or reach for the door handle. The door pops open. Mila, she whispers. Wait. Her fingers dig into my collar. She feels it now. The open air behind her. Too late. I pry her hands off me, using the impulse to send her flying out of the car. Sorry. I squeeze her one last time to make the hard push I give her. Bex screams. Her arms flail, desperate. For the door, for me, for anything. Her fingers catch on the seatbelt. All in vain. She tumbles, hitting the pavement in a mess of limbs. I should look away, but I don't. It roars. I turn just in time to see it pounce on the prone body on the road through the rear window. Rick finally breathes a sigh of relief, and seeing him do so uncoils the tight knot of tension between my shoulders. Theo closes his eyes and smiles, whistling along with the song playing. The car feels bigger now, quieter. I roll my shoulders, adjusting to the absence. Something lingers in the air, something final, or perhaps something new. 4 down to 3, a new dynamic. Interesting. It's a shame, but change is necessary sometimes, and there is no better time than right now. Isn't that the saying? I unbuckle my seat belt and close the car door. Smooth, careful. I lean between the front seats, smirking at Theo. He rolls his eyes, shaking his head fondly. I kiss Rick on the cheek, breathing in his cologne. He reaches up to stroke my cheek, takes his eyes off the road long enough to kiss the corner of my mouth. Not a word, he murmurs, to our grave. I grin. It roars behind us. Bex doesn't. We cross the state limits. I sit back. The rain races down my window enthusiastically. Would you look at that? I win again. Just 2 more hours to get home. Late for rest. This story centers around death. I'm late, she thought, as she ran for the bus. Her friends would say that was her life's motto. Amelia scrambled on the bus, trying not to jostle anyone. She had been given a final warning about not getting to work on time, and knew her boss was serious. She was good at her job. But this city had over 2 million people. She could be replaced. In fact, she was one of many autopsy technicians who were employed at her job. She enjoyed working with her colleagues and liked working under her supervisor. The problem was, on top of being a natural procrastinator, she was in school full-time while working full-time. But this was her last semester. Her goal was to become an Emmy. She had always been interested in true crime as a kid and spent her free time watching the ID channel. Her first interest was in forensic science because she wanted to investigate crime scenes. But death and dead bodies never bothered her, and she started working in the morgue as an undergrad, which spurred her interest in forensic pathology. It was then that she learned she was gifted in reading corpses. All those years of hearing about petechiae, cyanosis, and lividity became useful. She could read bodies like a book. That, combined with her proclivity for stockpiling information about diseases and murder, made her a veritable glossary of forensic pathology. Amelia was well liked at work because she was knowledgeable and friendly. Plus, she had a great work ethic while at work. It was outside of work that she struggled with procrastination. She just struggled to stay focused. If she had an assignment to do that required research, she'd end up going down rabbit holes on a side topic that caught her eye. She would know it's time to stop. But if a deadline wasn't impending, she knew she could get away with pushing something off in favor of exploring her current interest. This habit is what created such a wealth of knowledge for her. Unfortunately, it also made her have to do everything last minute or even late. Since becoming an adult and responsible for her own finances, she has never filed her taxes on time. 2 years in a row, she forgot altogether. To compensate, Amelia didn't get much sleep and often slept through her alarms. It was probably her body and brain's way to ensure she got enough sleep. Her boss didn't care how good of a worker she was if she continuously showed up late. She understood that, yet she still struggled to alter her habits. On top of that, she couldn't stay late because of her grad research. She had a thesis to finish and defend. Amelia lived in a state of guilt and shame over not being better at time management, but figured she'd have time to learn how to get better at it later. Today, it was important to not be late. There was still a possibility of making it on time. She missed her first bus, but ran full speed 6 blocks to catch a different one. She had a chance to rest before her stop, and then she'd have to sprint again for the light rail. It was a tight plan, requiring more physical exertion than she was used to, especially outside in Houston in the summer. But it was better to turn up drenched in sweat than late. For once, Amelia made it to work on time. And surprisingly, she wasn't sweating or even tired. Smiling to herself, she walked into the lab, expecting a few comments razzing her for unusual timeliness. However, everyone looked stern. This wasn't unusual in a morgue where many unfortunate events cause bodies to end up here. It was especially hard when it was a child or a victim of a violent assault. Or worse, a child who was a victim of a violent assault. Occasionally, a friend or relative of one of her colleagues came through. Everyone was very professional, but an underlying awkwardness was always present. Amelia approached the body they were centered around. She looked down at herself. Shock doesn't begin to describe what she felt. Confusion, of course, was also a dominant reaction. Was this a prank? The level of cruelty involved in doing something like this as a prank was beyond her comprehension. "What the fuck?" she yelled. For once, she was not late. And this is how they treat her. No one turned to look at her or even responded. "How the fuck did you do this?" Doubt started to flood in. She grew up in the foster system. Did she have a sister she didn't know about? Did she have a twin? "Who is this?" she yelled as her frustration and fear grew. Still, no one met her eye or replied. "When did she arrive?" her colleague Nate asked. "Half an hour ago," Mike, her supervisor, replied. For once, she was early. "What the actual fuck, guys?" "You are going too far," she screamed. She liked these people. How could they be so cruel? Was this supposed to be some kind of lesson for her extreme tardiness? Like an extreme example of what could happen if she continued living her life always running late. Ironically, I believe she was hit by a bus while she was running for a different one, Mike suggested. "Wow, death by bus," Angela quipped. "This is sick. It's not funny. Who is this?" she cried. Mike stepped back right into her, literally into her. It was slowly dawning on Amelia that this wasn't a prank. She looked down at the corpse that was obviously hers. She was dead. She was hit by a bus. It was unfathomable, but she still had a lot to do. "I don't think there is a need for an autopsy," Mike announced. Slowly, everyone turned away, and Amelia took the chance to step closer to her body. "Wait!" she exclaimed. No one listened. Amelia remembered her last moments. She had gotten in an argument with a man near the bus stop. His attempt at catcalling was graphic and disturbing, and she told him, "Shut the fuck up, creep." He retorted with a comment suggesting she needed to be raped. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" Amelia demanded. "You're an uptight bitch who needs a good dicking down, whether you want one or not," he replied. "I don't have time for this," she mumbled to herself while looking around for help. She saw a cop car across the street and started to head that way. She had to pause because a bus was rapidly approaching her stop. The last thing she remembers is being pushed. "This was not an accident," she yelled at her colleagues. Desperation set in as she realized this would be recorded as an accident instead of the murder it was. Legally, it was probably manslaughter, but when you're the one killed, you feel murdered, not manslaughtered. Her colleagues continued to go about their business as Mike filled out the paperwork. "Please look again, Mike," she said as she peered over his shoulder. She watched him type the details, or her death, which she found the most surreal event of the day. "Please," she whispered again, before going to look at her body for evidence that she had been pushed. She needed someone to turn herself over. She even reached out herself, but in her non-corporeal state, there was nothing she could do. She cried tearlessly as she lost hope. "I feel we should do something more for Amelia," Angela said. "Like plan her funeral," Mike suggested. She had no family. "I was thinking more along the lines of an autopsy," she offered. "Amelia would have wanted one." It's true. Even if she hadn't suspected an attack, she still would want an autopsy. She had already planned for her body to be donated to the body farm when she died. She had lived a life of science and wanted to continue in death. "You're right," Mike said. Before getting up, he changed the paperwork to justify an autopsy. Amelia waited as patiently as she could until it happened. Her body was finally rolled over, and there were marks indicating that she wasn't just pushed, but punched in the back with 2 fists. "Holy shit," Angela remarked. Stunned, the whole team began discussing possibilities as Amelia felt herself being pulled away. "No, I don't want to go," she cried. This would be the final rabbit hole she'd ever go down, and the most important one to her. She fought against this invisible force, tugging her away, because her interest was piqued. She had to know that they solved this crime. The cops needed to know to look at security cameras so they could find this guy. She physically felt like she was in a game of tug of war, with her soul being the middle of the rope. Finally, one last tug pulled her away. There's at least one place she could not be late for, so today's story has come to an end. Or perhaps it never really ended. There are mysteries still there, questions still unanswered. And sometimes, things that seem to only exist in stories can creep into reality in unexpected ways. Are you sure that when you turn off the sound, everything around you will still be normal as before? Or is there something watching you? Either way, always remember that these are just stories, or at least we want to believe that they are. If you like moments of suspense, tension, and breathlessness, don't forget to follow me so you don't miss the next stories. And next time, when you come back, make sure you are ready, because what awaits you may be even scarier than you thought. See you again if you still have the courage to continue listening.